My name is Jeanine Bota. I am a county councillor with Red Deer County, Alberta, in central Alberta. And I also chair the Alberta Community Crime Prevention Association. This project began in 2018, and the objective was, we knew rural issues were at the top of the agenda, but as a lot of us were asking, what is rural crime? What does it really involve? So we knew there was a lack of security in communities. We knew there was a lack of knowledge. There was a lack of capacity within rural communities, and there was no collaboration whatsoever. So this 2-year project, it's now been extended 1 year just due to COVID. There is 4 partners involved: Alberta Community Crime Prevention, Red Deer Lacombe Rural Crime Watch, Reach Edmonton, and also Canadian Municipal Network for Crime Prevention. And the reason all 4 are involved, all 4 have different areas of expertise that they can contribute. So the 2-year project really looks at every aspect of the problem, the root causes, what is really going on in communities. We all understand that policing is needed and enforcement is very important, but what is really going on in the communities? So the capacity aspect is something that needed to be addressed and looked at, because from a rural community aspect, it's not something that they're capable of doing. We were pleased that the government agreed to go with this. We felt it was very visionary and forward thinking, and we're hoping that this will lead to more sites getting involved. We have 5 pilot sites that were selected on certain criteria, and those were chosen through our K Division gentleman, Peter Tufik. So what we will do, and the end result really is a community safety framework plan that would involve collaboration from all the communities. And so what I'll maybe do is turn this over to Heather Leslie. She's the CEO of the Village of Bicycle.
Hello to everyone, and welcome to this session on the information sharing during the CMNCP conference. I was thinking that you've been through a few days of some pretty heavy presentations, and these topics can be both serious and critical. So I took some privileges to hopefully keep this one more light and positive. Just to start off with, on behalf of the Village of Bicycle, for some reason, there we go. On behalf of the Village of Bicycle, and yes, we're one of those typical Canadiana villages with a mascot, and yes, we are the proud caretaker of Squirt the Skunk. On behalf of Bicycle, including our residents, businesses, visitors, and rural neighbors, I just wanted to take a brief moment to express our appreciation for being invited to participate in the Rural Crime Prevention Project and the opportunity to share with you our experience with engaging our community in the program. The goal we have undertaken is to develop a community safety and well-being plan that will address issues related to the reduction of crime in our area, with an emphasis on meeting the safety and well-being needs that are specific to our community. We recognize that Bicycle was chosen as one of the pilot sites around Alberta since we represent a smaller community. We're a village of just over 800 souls that range in age from newborns to seniors. On the map, you'll see we're within 75 kilometers of Calgary and about 45 kilometers from the city of Airdrie, who host about 68,000 people. We are often described as urban. We're a small town structure that serves our citizens and our rural neighbors. At first glance, you might consider us a lucky municipality. We are blessed with a school, a seniors' home, local access to social and health services. We have recreational facilities like arenas and parks, walking trails, and a very active community hall. We have a local RCMP detachment. We have our own bylaw department. And what we can't get in Bicycle is usually just a short drive away from either Airdrie or Calgary. As a result of our close proximity to larger centers, many of our residents commute to town or out of town for work. Our geographical location puts us in a corridor to a number of tourist attractions that draws people to stop and visit or pass through Bicycur on their way to other destinations. What we've discovered through the training offered through the Rural Crime Prevention Program was that issues relating to safety and well-being are sometimes hidden from view, and that the concept of crime and safety are often replicated in perceptions rather than reality. The key to uncovering these issues and bringing those realities to light was to form a committee of individuals that represents various demographics and organizations to assist us in the discovery of where we really are in relation to having a safe and healthy community, to develop a plan and a mechanism to continue with what is working and to fill the gaps that have yet to be addressed. We've been asked to speak today on how we engage the community in our project. It can be overwhelming to see the magnitude of a project this size and scope in its beginning stages. My suggestion to you is be brave, dive in, and almost immediately the path will start to come clear. In our experience, we took the old baby steps approach, one bite at a time. We needed to choose a leader within the village administration staff to head up the project. And given that we're only a small team of almost 6 or so very busy folks, as the village CAO, I elected myself to sign up. The training in rural crime reduction received from the CMNCP and funded through this project was invaluable, both for myself and then eventually for a few more members of our team. We need a council buy-in for the project, and this was just not an issue in our case. Rural crime is a focal point of our council and many members of our community. Before we engaged with the Community Safety Plan project, much of the concern around crime was about theft and vandalism, and a perception that much of this was coming from outside our community. We never really blame ourselves. The next step was to form the community committee. I made a list of all of the areas of our community that we would like represented. Again, in keeping with bringing together representation from all demographics and community agencies, this was the summary of my list. I sent out a communication to contacts in each of these sectors that explained our initiative and basically asked them to show up at a meeting. I was quite frankly stunned at how many of the invitees actually showed up. I don't know if the reason was that turned out was because they were really interested in the topic, or it's just an example of the community involvement that's already exists in this small town atmosphere. It might have been the snacks and coffee. Make sure you have those available at your first invitation and keep the food coming as you progress. During the first meeting, Jan Fox and Jean Bota, our project leads, helped to explain our purpose and goals to the group. We made sure to go around the table to talk to everyone about what issues around rural crime were top of mind. So with 12 to 15 people or so at the table, the list of issues and concerns relating to the reduction of rural crime already started to grow. As expected, many in the group had significant concerns and ideas. What we heard from the committee also was that they wanted clear direction. What do you want me to do? When do I have to do it? And how can I get this done? I was handed my marching orders and off I went to fulfill them. The next baby step was to realize that this project was not going to be completed by myself. We needed a leadership team. So I chose 2 other people from our village administration to form the advisory committee. This isn't really what we look like, but there are some definite personality likenesses showing here, and I'm not going to show you which one is me. Again, we seem to have just the right people ready to get started. The team now included an employee from administration that has lived and worked in Bicycur for a number of decades. Gail Peckham is an excellent resource when it comes to making contact with individuals and understanding the spirit and drive of the local community. Brooke Swanson, who basically drives the bus for this project, providing communications, planning, and archiving information, holds the role of community services representative for the village of Bicycur and provides recreation and social programming in her normal job. And then there's me, happy to provide guidance and leadership as it's needed. We set to work to provide the community committee with what they asked for. We started off by setting clear objectives. Using our CMNCP training as a guide, we set out the objectives that would take us to the completion and implementation stage of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Next, a map that includes a schedule of meetings that align with the objectives was created. A calendar with a clear line to the goal of plan completion and implementation. And built into this map is flexibility. If it has to stop, it restarts, but it helps us to get back on track if we find ourselves going in other directions. In the meantime, our community engagement included the development of an assessment survey to hear from our residents and businesses regarding their concerns with crime and safety and to start learning about their ideas around well-being. This is their plan. This survey will be conducted in a number of simultaneous platforms in hopes that we get as much feedback as possible from our participants. So we'll be offering the survey online, on paper for those that requested in that format, and in person. For example, our plan is to do one-on-one sessions with the survey and our seniors, or in group sessions with members of target demographics and organizations such as parents and local businesses. The advisory committee has started the process of scoping the community for facilities, programming, and services that do exist, and we're starting to see the gaps pop up already. Even in the absence of meeting in person or performing surveys due to COVID restrictions, our ongoing conversations with folks builds on this list almost every time we pick up the phone. Maintaining strong community engagement, whether that's from the community committee or the public in general, is not rocket science. I'm sure everyone in the room understands the keys to keeping a group on board and constructive. But this is what we learned, basically our values to keep it going. Clear and consistent communication. We need to keep the conversation going by communicating regularly, either in person or by emails and announcements, but by also ensuring that our ears are open, both formally and informally. At our meetings, we encourage and promote group discussion. We ensure that everyone is included and has a chance to speak. The advisory committee has built in a number of intervals in our map when we'll share our achievements with both the committee and the community. This is all about celebrating the value of the project to keep the incentive going. We recognize that keeping the size of the committee realistic and constructive is important. Optimum use of resources is key, especially in a really small community where people often wear several hats. For example, the representative from the Chamber of Commerce might also be the president of the Ag Society. So can that person represent both demographics? We'll be forming subcommittees to deal with specific sectors of the community, such as youth, seniors, and the vulnerable populations. We're considering offering the opportunity for people to work with groups that they aren't necessarily familiar with. This is our sneaky way of enhancing community connection. We are encouraging our committee members to wear ambassador hats and keep our doors open to hear from them and others, whether we're in formal meetings or someone just wants to chat. And utilizing external resources, especially again from the small town perspective where we have very few people but lots of needs. This comes about understanding what services or information is available from outside of Bicycur. It includes our pilot partners, resources introduced from program leadership, such as opportunities for memberships in related external organizations, program options, community presentations, and services that we don't already know about. Our goal is to keep offering education in a variety of ways to all levels of this program, whether that's the advisory, community committees, or the public at large. When we offer programs or services, we want to watch for the places where people engage and where they don't. If people aren't responding to the program offerings, perhaps we aren't seeing what they do need. One of the issues we uncovered in this way was to offer youth online programming, especially during the COVID shutdowns, on shutdown. And no one really signed up, and we wondered why. And when we asked even before COVID, one of the things that the youth in Bicycle wanted was a physical space to get together after school and during time off. We learned a really big lesson about assuming people's needs and asking questions instead. So to keep it going, a number of things just to make sure that this project reaches its implementation stage, but also to ensure its continuity in the future. We need to ensure that the plan includes a mechanism to keep the committee at the table for reviews and checkups, defining any action items to address current and changing needs. Representation. Is everybody at the table? This is another constant review that must be addressed as issues arise. We will be regularly evaluating the membership of the committee, and if we lose a member, we immediately ask for a replacement. If that doesn't work, we'll provide a reasonable follow-up to get a representative from that group. But we also realize that when to know when to stop pestering is the key. This doesn't mean we can't pick up the phone in a few months and ask again, especially if we know that representation from a particular group is vital when dealing with an issue, a particular issue or concern. We are committed to provide regular interactions and communication to the community at large. Updates about the project, program offerings, services, and articles in our media regarding the issues related to community well-being and rural crime prevention are planned and scheduled. Branding of the program is another aspect of communication that we need to work on. We need a logo. We need to consistently name the project in our communications. And we are setting up a page on our website, a corner of our newsletter, and regular postings to our social media will keep the seed growing and our community involved. The other constant engagement is with our school. Our ears are open with this group. One of our fundamentals is to start with the young folks, keep them safe and healthy so we can build a foundation to keep this going for years to come. And as we continue with the program, our plan is to invite our municipal neighbors to adopt a plan of their own or sit in on our initiative. There are several small towns in our jurisdiction that are almost mirrors of our own when it comes to location and size and the issues they're facing around crime and safety. In closing, I wanted to reiterate that our community considers our involvement in this project to be both a privilege and an opportunity to open channels both internally and externally to address issues related to rural crime and community well-being. The support we receive from the leadership on this project, Jean Bota, Jan Fox, and Audrey Manette, and many more, the training we were offered through the CMNCP, the opportunities we've derived from our relationship and interactions with the other pilot groups, and our experience bringing our own resources and services together have all been key aspects of our success so far. After all, as they say, it takes a village. Thank you.
We're going on to Paul Edginton, and Paul is the General Manager of Community and Protective Services in Wetaskiwin, and Wetaskiwin is also one of our pilot sites. And he believes working with strong, progressive, passionate community leaders is the way to deal with societal and deep-rooted issues. So, Paul, if you could go ahead. Thanks.
Welcome. Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Edginton. I am the General Manager of Community and Protective Services for the City of Wetaskiwin. And Jean and Jan and Audrey ever so politely asked me to share what we've been dealing with in Wetaskiwin. Really over the past 3 years, I've been with the municipality for about a year. And so I can share a little bit of innately, a little bit more of the story over the past year in how our community has come together in addressing homelessness and mental health in rural communities. So just a presentation here this morning. Some things I'm going to go over is just talking a little bit about understanding what homelessness means in Wetaskiwin and Wetaskiwin region. We've going back over the past 3 years have had a number of studies done of understanding homelessness, and wanted to share a little bit of some insight there from our perspective. Also, I think since about 2018, our community has been working. Our council has directed administration to work to support the vulnerable population. And so through that time, we've made a lot of mistakes. We've made a lot of wrong turns, and the story hasn't always been linear. But I wanted to share the history a little bit, and also some lessons learned that we've had over the past 3 years, and specifically the past year with the involvement of our 24/7 integrated support hub in the community. And lastly, and one of the things we want to talk about where we go moving forward is how we're coming together as a community to build on the pilot site project that is being overseen by Audrey, Jean, and Jan, and coming together to create a regional community safety and well-being strategy for the region. So let's delve into the understanding homelessness piece. You folks would be well aware of the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness and their definition. And so one of the things that our community has looked at is how they define homelessness. And typically that is the situation of an individual, family, or community without stable, safe, permanent, appropriate housing, or the immediate prospect, means, and ability of acquiring it. And the Canadian Observatory actually defines 4 different types of homelessness. In Wetaskiwin, prior to us opening a 24/7 shelter, when our community talked about homelessness, what they were really talking about was the unsheltered or the emergency unsheltered, the people that you could see on the street, the people that are popping up in encampments, and the ones that really need the help probably the most. And what I'll get through as we go on later in the slide deck, later in the story, is that through the 24/7 hub solution that we had in our community, we started to see the other part of the spectrum. But we haven't ever done a study that tells us how many people in the region might be part of the spectrum. And I say the region because I hail from Wetaskiwin, and I should have maybe spent some time talking about where that is. We're about an hour south of Edmonton in central Alberta, 45 minutes to an hour. And we have city of Wetaskiwin, county of Wetaskiwin, and then to this about 10 minutes south of us, we have 4 Cree nations of Masquatchees, which includes Samson, Ermineskin, Louisbourg, and Montana First Nations. And so individually as a municipality, we've done a lot of work on how many homeless, emergency sheltered do we have in our community, but we haven't really talked as a region about what does that look like, because homelessness is fluid, as you folks would know. And what we've seen is that it ebbs and flows, and we don't really have a good handle on what that looks like. So moving forward, those data sets will be really important. I spoke a lot to the previous studies that have been completed. 2019, community social needs assessment was done. I believe that was through our FCSS, and Nickel Supply Management out of Edmonton came in and did a study. We also had, through the Alberta Rural Development Network, did a homelessness count in about 2018. Wetaskiwin RCMP have also provided statistics on the vulnerable population through their crime statistics. And then the Cameras Open Door, which was the agency that we partnered with last year to run the 24/7 hub, they provided a host of statistics that we're just getting access to now. And we're going to be working with the RCMP and the Open Door and analyzing that, better understanding exactly what we saw and analyzing it to better dictate what we do in the future. But the big piece on all of this around understanding homelessness is getting a better sense of what is happening as a region, getting a better sense of what those data sets are telling us, to ensure that we're widening our lens and being inclusive and intentional, so they're not leaving anybody behind. And if there was, once we get to the point where, get to where Bicycle has been in being able to actually develop a regional community safety and wellbeing strategy, to have some good data to accurately inform what's going on instead of just guessing. So that was the first piece around how our point, or our attempt to try to understand homelessness, the history of the city and working with our vulnerable population actually stretches back. I think the earliest we saw any motions from council was 2010. And then it faded off until about 2018. And I'm sure if anybody was watching the CBC national news, that they would have heard about Wetaskiwin and administration bringing skate shacks out to where there was an informal homeless encampment set up. They were actually brought out by administration to keep the population cool from the summer sun. And then they ended up burning down, which got a lot of focus on the vulnerable population and what was going on here in Wetaskiwin. In 2019, our council made a motion to create an emergency shelter, but have it run by city volunteers. The city volunteers in Wetaskiwin don't have any training to deal with the population, or we didn't have any experience really in running a shelter. It didn't really end well. I believe it was closed prematurely in February. Then later that year, 2019, 2020, the next winter, we partnered with a faith-based organization in town called the Lighthouse Church to run the shelter. Again, that closed in February. And in this past year, the community partnered with Camrose Open Door to run a 24/7 integrated support hub from the Civic Building. So all three of these shelters were run out of something called the Civic Building, which is our old city hall here in Wetaskiwin. It's a vacated building, and it was actually located downtown. The differences between the city run and the Lighthouse Church run shelter is that those were primarily winter overnights, and the one over the past year was a 24/7 support hub. And what that means is it provides emergency shelter to those individuals that need it, but it also provides the wraparound services such as AHS medical supports and counseling to start providing some medical and mental health supports to the population. But throughout all of these solutions, what we realized, and not just the 24/7, but all of these solutions, is that nothing has been good enough yet. What we found is that the solutions we've tried to roll out here in the community have negatively impacted our community's overall sense of safety. Generally, the last three iterations of a shelter have been run out of downtown Wetaskiwin, which it negatively impacts the businesses. We hear a lot about number of assaults and nuisances that are happening in the community. And so what we're hearing from the community is that they don't feel safe. We're also alienating members of our own community. There has been a perception that we're more focused on supporting our vulnerable than we are others in our community. It's not necessarily true, just a perception. The 24/7 hub was run during the pandemic, and so businesses downtown were already hit hard by a pandemic. And then, some of those businesses that were very close to the hub, they were reporting that the patrons wouldn't come do business with them. And so, what had happened essentially was we were and still are very much a divided community on how to provide these supports. And a lot of the resources that we've been focusing on over the past 3 years specifically have been focusing on an emergency shelter, need to get this going and need to get it up and running. And what that does is it takes away our resources away from a longer term, more sustainable solution. And that's the work we're trying to get to with the support from Audrey, Jean, and Jan. So we've learned a lot, but the three lessons learned, I think, that we could probably focus on, just if you had to ask me, what's the three major things you learned? The first is that our community engagement wasn't good enough. Our dialogue was typically reactive. By the time we got around to having the conversation, it was a little too late. I can talk a little bit later about what we're doing this time around, hopefully, to combat a lot of that. But we also were working in silos. City administration was siloed from the RCMP, siloed from the shelter provider, the Open Door, and essentially, I think that was one of the downfalls. The other piece to it was, and I just spoke to it briefly, was when you react to crisis continually in rural Alberta, we are not one of the larger municipalities. We don't have the same level of funding that other municipalities have to provide the resources. And so we really have to be very strategic and very moving forward. We'll have to very much focus on where we're going to spend our time. We recognize that we still are in a crisis mode. We're about to head into a winter right now with freeze up only weeks away, and we have no shelter in place just yet. And I'll speak to that in a second. The other piece too is that this entire 3 years, our community and partners have been looking at the city exclusively to solve this. And what we're learning is we cannot solve it on our own. And we have now branched out to the 4 Cree Nations of Maskwacis, as well as Wetaskiwin County, and our community partners to work together on a solution instead of trying to do this on our own. And so I'm a man of metaphors. If those of you, nobody here I think really knows me that well, but I'm a man of metaphors. And so over the past year, I've been thinking a lot about a rainforest and how a lot of what we're trying to put in place here in Wetaskiwin now, moving forward, is very much this ecosystem approach. And if you Google the literature around an ecosystem approach, there is a lot of papers written about the value of community partners working together. It's very much the same type of essence that our pilot site project is being run off of. And it's also the same philosophy as a collective impact philosophy. Essentially, we are stronger together than just the silo, right? The sum of its parts are greater than just us individually. And so if you think about an ecosystem in a rainforest, in Wetaskiwin, it would look like the city of Wetaskiwin, Wetaskiwin County, and then the 4 Cree Nations, Sampson, Ermineskin, Louisville, Montana. But the organisms in this metaphor are all of our stakeholders. And that includes residents, businesses, schools, hospitals, social agencies, and other municipalities in the region. as well as other levels of government. And what we're hoping to do is to build an ecosystem, build these foundations, build these tables where we can have really good conversations and start to build those relationships and trust so that we can start to build towards more sustainable structures, foundations, and solutions for our community moving forward. What our ecosystem looks today, if I had to draw it in PowerPoint, which I did here, my apologies for the lack of graphic design, but it's all we quickly established in about June of this year. So this is at the end of the shelter. So the 24/7 shelter was the lease was terminated by council in about May of 2020, and in June we started getting more actively involved with Jan and Audrey and Jean on this pilot project, and have created a terms of reference for a regional community safety and well-being committee. And the overall vision for this is to have a governing board that includes decision makers from those municipalities I talked about, as well as groups like the AHS, Wetaskiwin FCSS, and the RCMP, and the school board. And what the intention of that is to start talking about what issues are we facing, what are the data sets we're seeing, and what actions do we need to take, and to help direct a lot of this as a region. And then these little balls are essentially the subcommittees or task force where, right now it's very much organically has been created through the need. And so today we have a guiding coalition of homelessness that is tied back to the Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee. They're very much focused on helping us solve the issues now, essentially the actions and boots on the ground, and then also helping us focus on what are we doing for this next upcoming winter. We have an emergency response planning group that we've come across a number of crises in our community with our vulnerable population specifically. We've had at least 2 or 3 COVID outbreaks. With this summer, it was extremely hot, so we need to rely on the Red Cross to open a cooling shelter, and then in the extreme cold, the emergency shelter. And so there is a growing need amongst AHS and PCN and Wetaskiwin FCSS and the Red Cross and the city to have more of a conversation about what the roles and responsibilities of those tables, so that we know what we're doing when we actually have to respond. Our Diversity and Inclusion Task Force is a group of interested residents and businesses that are coming together to talk about how can we educate our community and make ourselves more diverse and inclusive as a community. And our council has actually just created a winter shelter advisory board, which includes the RCMP, AHS, includes some First Nations representatives, includes the city, Wetaskiwin FCSS. And that group is going to be advising our council moving forward on what do we do for this winter, which essentially gets us out as administrators out of trying to provide that solution, or it gets us out of going to the first agency that pops into the community and starts talking about, what do we do let's listen to the people that have the subject matter expertise around running a shelter, around funding shelters, around the medical supports, and around the perspective of First Nations people. And let's talk about what a solution might look like here in Wetaskiwin. So right now, our ecosystem very much needs some nurturing, very much needs some love, and it's very much, I'm trying to show here, it's very much isolated, that we've created these committees and they're not exactly working like a system just yet. But moving forward, the vision is to, over time, if we keep at this work, and if we especially if we grow the work through the Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing, our vision there is to have a 20-year strategy as a region, to see all those municipalities buy on and to come together to do that work, to identify some really solid outcomes that we can measure over time. And then, in the vision here is to perhaps complex issues such as mental health and addictions, food security, housing, and crime that we all have in all of our communities, that we could start to tackle these complex social issues together at the table. And so I've done enough talking. I think I have just a very short video that can kind of describe the approach here in Wetaskiwin and where we're going.
Our community really needs to come together and say, we have a problem and we need to deal with it. We have to be prepared to have those difficult conversations with each other. And we have to be real with each other about the problems that we're having and be prepared to deal with them. what if.
So I've seen that video about 25 times, and every time I tear up towards the end. So
Yeah.
didn't mean to do that to you folks this morning, but I would just to close up, and I think I'm getting close to the end of my 15 minutes, but we ventured into this about 1.5 years ago, and we've grown significantly as a community, as a council, as an administration, but we won't pretend that we have all the answers. And so just to close, I would urge any of you on the call here that if your community has gone through this and you've been here before, to reach out directly, and we can learn together and bound together. And if you're a community that's also looking at this and saying, yeah, we need to start going in this direction, reach out as well. This, to Jean and Jan's point, there is no point in recreating the wheel here. And, we need to learn from each other as we move forward on this. And so I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all this morning, and thank you for your time.
That was excellent, Paul. Thank you very much. Yeah, that video is very powerful. That's a powerful message. You're right.
Yeah, Paul, I think we could show that video a lot. Well done. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Dr. Jeanine Weber. And when the project began, she joined our steering committee, and she was with the Lethbridge College. She's now the executive director academia with Red River College. And she believes the way to strong, healthy communities is through research. So we've had some discussions with Jeanine about how we can involve students in a lot of the rural communities and how they can help with the capacity issue that some of the communities are having. So I'll let you proceed. Thank you, Jeanine. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to speak to everyone today from the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji Cree, Dene, and Dakota people, and from the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I just have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure being one of the 2 academic members of this project team. It's been really exciting to see the progress that the communities who are the pilot sites have made, and the learning and the sharing just between the sites. It's been really energizing. And I think that there's already been significant accomplishments, and we learned about a couple of those this morning, but I think there's more to come. And I think this is really, by working together and networking and sharing resources, this is how we address some of these very complicated and complex challenges that we have. So I'm not going to go into too many details, but we do know that crime is experienced different in rural areas. And so there's a lot of work still to be done to try to understand that and to come up with really meaningful strategies to assist smaller communities. And one of the things that's of particular concern right now in Canada, particularly in the prairies, is the higher crime rates that are being observed in our smaller communities compared to our urban settings. So we've done a lot of work in our urban settings. We need to do more work in our rural areas to support them. And I think that it's when we know that there's the smaller service providers, so the police services are spread out, they're responsible for much larger geographical locations. When someone is calling for help, they have to wait a longer period of time, which increases the sense of vulnerability for residents. And we also know that reactive policing, reactive strategies are not things that reduce victimization, because we're reacting at that point to victimization. To prevent that, we need to look at some of the underlying issues within our communities and work on addressing those so that we're reducing how many people who are even in a situation of being victimized or dealing with situations that are untenable. And so they break into a cottage in order to be able to stay alive that night because it's really cold out and they need shelter. So there's really those kinds of issues that we need to be focusing on. And I think that's what our communities in the pilot sites are really digging deep to address. how can post-secondary institutions help? How can we be partners in helping communities see a higher quality of life? Well, we do know, and I'm not going to belabor this, there's lots of research out there that says for the individual who has a post-secondary education, there's enhanced quality of life that's associated with more stable employment, more financial resources, more social connections, social capital, and as a result, better health and less need for some services. So that's one way that post-secondary institutions can be helpful. We also know that in communities that have more people who have had the opportunity to participate in post-secondary education, they also reap those benefits. What we need to do as post-secondary educators is continue to work hard at creating those pathways that make education more accessible. So many people in more isolated areas have the additional cost of relocating to places where there is a post-secondary institution. That's a challenge financially. And so as more and more education becomes available online, and I think that the one silver lining of the pandemic we've dealt with is I think post-secondary institutions have really had to learn to adapt quickly. And I think that we'll see even greater access for people to participate. We still have to deal with reliable internet connections in some more remote areas. And I know that the college that I was at, we had fully online programs as well as fully on-campus programs. And the Polytechnic that I am currently at, we have regional campuses as well as online and on campus programs. So you're seeing a mix and a change in the way in which education is delivered, which hopefully will, in the long term, make a meaningful difference. Now, one of the things that we really started to dig into in this project, and then I sort of switch provinces and a different college, but I'm very excited to have been part of the very beginning of this. And that is just really talking about how can we leverage the resources of the community and the post-secondary institution together. And we have different resources. We have different subject matter experts. And we also have students who are looking for real world learning experiences. And we're really recognizing that that is such a key piece to their success upon graduation. And so here's a real need in some of our pilot sites for some additional hands who, someone who could create the social media site, someone who could perhaps create some information for residents on how to prevent identity fraud and identity theft. I mean, there's a whole host of things that students could be doing. Child and youth care students could be working on helping to develop after-school structured, safe experiences for the youth that they can staff, they can facilitate under some guidance of community members or agencies that don't have the staff to add that to the complement of what they're doing, but they can certainly oversee it and provide guidance. And then, of course, you have the faculty members who are experts in those fields, supervising those students, providing guidance. And so it's a win-win. But how do you even know where to begin? There's all these post-secondary institutions. And if you're in a community and you don't have an academic institution in your community, it might seem like that's not a resource available to you, but it is. There's many things to consider. So all of my online students at Lethbridge College, many of them lived in smaller communities across Canada. They didn't want to move to do their work integrated learning, their practicums, their placements, their co-ops. They wanted to stay within their communities. So there's probably students that you don't even know about who are very much located in your area. The other thing is, if you're looking for students to help create materials, websites, social media, they can do all of that from a distance. It doesn't have to be having the student relocate to your area. So there's lots of different ways in which students can be part of your resources as a community as you're looking towards creating a more well-rounded, healthy options in the areas that you've said are particular concerns. The other thing that's really unique at polytechnic institutions and colleges is that the research is applied. And the very focus of the applied research is about solving a real-world problem for the partner. And the partner does not have to be a for-profit business. They can be a community service agency, a local government, an organization, and there is pockets of money that academic institutions can access, but they must have a community or an organizational partner who's part of that in order to access that. So that's another way in which there may be opportunities for communities to be able to achieve goals, is to work in partnership on an applied research project where you can then access some additional funding that you may not on your own have access to. And so I think there's all of those opportunities that we don't always think of. And I think as post-secondary institutions, we have to do a better job of making sure all possible partners are aware of what we offer and what we can do. One of the things we started to do with this project is create a streamlined process where communities could contact one key person at the institution, so at Lethbridge College or at Red Deer Polytech, and then be able to share a little bit about the project and the concern or issue that they're trying to address. And then that person at the post-secondary institution would then pull together the right people and then create a bridging meeting and discuss what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, how could we work together, and how could we help to achieve the goal. And so what I would say is, if you're not part of this pilot project, that doesn't mean you can't right now start to look and engage with post-secondary institutions. They all have external relationship departments. And if you can't find that, look for the name of the dean of the subject area most closely aligned with the kind of project that you're looking for and call. And that the dean will be absolutely happy to have those conversations and will know who to pull in. So if they're not the right person, they'll know who the right person is to put you together so that you can have those conversations. I think that there's untapped resources available, and I think there's a real need and a real recognition that we want to provide more work integrated learning opportunities for our students. And we also want our faculty members to continue to be able to make meaningful contributions in their field of expertise. And this is, again, a way for them to be really giving back to their communities. And so I really encourage you to think about it, and don't let "I don't know who to start with" stop you from calling, because as soon as you start talking to someone at the college or the university or the polytech, they will know who to start to put you in connection to. So I'm going to leave it there, because I think that I just wanted to share a little bit of where we got to in the project. And I know that in a few months' time, there'll be some feedback that the communities will have on how this system has worked to try to streamline getting partnerships with the academic institutions going. So thank you.